Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with okjersey.com. Looking for football shirts? Head over to okjersey.com and enter the discount code Harry for 8% off. Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast proper. Yes, I'm back in the UK. I am back on British soil. I am back ready to get back into the thick of things. Arsenal taking on Nottingham Forest today at the City Ground. Every game feels huge. Every game feels really, really significant. Of course, I'm going to start my day by sitting down and watching the Manchester derby. Manchester United with Michael Carrick at the helm. Can they take something off of Manchester City, who are looking to chase us down in the title race? We're going to talk a little bit about Manchester City as the show goes on, because there's a few interesting stories around them right now that I think, even from an Arsenal perspective, are worth discussing. Before we get into all of that, I want to say a massive thank you to all of you for your patience while I've been away this week. I've been in Cyprus from Monday to Friday. The reason for my trip was not a jolly. It turned into kind of a jolly at times, as is always the case when I go to Cyprus. But it was a trip that was based around the making of a podcast documentary that I've been trying to line up for a little while, that I've been thinking about for a little while, and we finally got the material to get it done. So I'm making a documentary on Pafos FC, Cypriot club, who have risen to not just the top of Cypriot football, but they're also now a Champions League club. They've got the likes of David Luiz playing there as well. And the story, if you know anything about Cypriot football, is a really, really interesting one. If you don't like Cypriot football and you don't know anything about it, which is probably the case for most people, then this is a proper underdog story, and one that I think you'll find quite interesting. Now, during my trip, I was able to speak to some of Cyprus's top sports broadcasters who gave me an insight into Pafos's rise kind of from the outside looking in. I was able to speak to the CEO of the club, who provided some unbelievable anecdotes and information about how the club has grown over the last few years. I spoke to their goalkeeper, Cyprus international Neophytos Michail, who, again, being Cypriot, will understand exactly how against the grain this rise has been, because there are big clubs in Cyprus, relative to the size of Cyprus, obviously, that people look at and they go, well, they would be the top dogs. They should be the top dogs. They have been the top dogs for the last 20, 30 years. So where the hell have this lot come from? So it's a really, really interesting piece. We tell the story of their rise with some help from those amazing people. I also spoke to Michalis Sofogleos, who for Cypriots, you'll know, is one of the most famous TV personalities over there, but he happens to be a Pafos supporter as well. So yeah, look, not everybody's going to want to listen to it, but because the subject, I suppose, is so niche, but I really enjoyed making it. And I hope that as loyal listeners of the Chronicles of a Gooner, you will give it a chance, and it will be out early next week ahead of their game against Chelsea in the Champions League, which is what prompted me into doing it in the first place. Okay, let's get into today, though. Arsenal travel to the City Ground to take on Nottingham Forest. We got a really good result in midweek at Chelsea in the Carabao Cup. We spoke about it on the reaction pod. There was a part of me that was a little bit disappointed at the fact that we couldn't maintain that 2-goal cushion. That was my frustration, I suppose, coming away from the game. But again, when I think about it and I process it and I sort of look at it from a more sort of sensible standpoint, I do think to myself, if you'd have offered me a 1-0 at Stamford Bridge before the game, I'd have taken it. Well, what's the difference here? The only difference is that you feel like you could have done more, like you feel like you could add more in terms of a lead. But with Arsenal's record at home, with Arsenal's defensive solidity, generally speaking, I know it wasn't necessarily on show that night, I think you've got to fancy Arsenal now to make it to the Carabao Cup final. And looks like if we do, we'll face Manchester City. And some people would say that makes me uncomfortable. Listen, we're going to have to beat them at some point. We're going to have to overcome them at some point. And I just think to myself that if we could go all the way in this competition, a competition, by the way, that we haven't won since 1993, what that does is it just gives us a little bit of a confidence boost. It might just give us that 5-10% extra that we need to get over the line and make good of all our promise. That's the hope anyway. But going into today's game, I feel quite relaxed because we were able to make a few changes. And that was off the back of having made loads against Portsmouth. So I don't feel like the players have been like super overloaded, if that makes sense. I think one of the things that we always struggle with as a team, and when we struggle with, as football people, when we discuss the schedule, is the 3 games in a week thing. Well, for a lot of our players, this won't be the 3rd game in the week. It will be the 2nd. And I think, you can moan all you want about 3 a week. And I think 3 a week is ridiculous. And I sort of agree with that sentiment. I do, because we played Portsmouth on Sunday. Then we played Chelsea on Wednesday. And then on Saturday, we're playing again in the Premier League. So it's 3 in a week. It's hard. It's difficult. You can moan about that. You can't really moan about 2 a week, because that is the absolute minimum that is required if you're going to compete in the game's biggest competitions and for the game's biggest prizes. So for a lot of these players, it will be their 2nd game in the week. And I think that should mean that they still have just about enough in the tank. And also, we've got the depth nowadays. We talk about it all the time. We've got the depth to make changes, to shake things up, to bring people on after 60, 65, sometimes 70 minutes, even earlier, if we wish to. And that is significant and really, really important. And it's why I believe Arsenal are in a much better place these days to go on and succeed than we maybe would have been in the past. James Bond highlights that it will be Big Gabby's 3rd game. Yeah, and that's been down to injuries. Like, that has been something that we just can't avoid, unfortunately, without weakening the team too much, I feel anyway. So, yes, in Big Gabby's case, that's right. Mikel Arteta was, again, as he always is, very coy on who's fit, who's not. He was asked about Ricardo Calafiori. He refused to rule him out, which could be a good sign. Obviously, there's Miles Lewis-Skelly that can come in and play at left back as well, which means that if you want to go with a team similar to the one that played against Chelsea, you could tuck Timber inside if you need to. You could tuck White inside and use Timber at right back. I talked about it after the Chelsea game. I think there's a lack of trust at the moment in Miles Lewis-Skelly based on his current form. And some people will say that's harsh. I think when you're at this level and you're seeking to achieve, you need to be ruthless. And I think we have been ruthless with him recently, where we've decided to overlook him, not because of overload. He's a young lad. He hasn't played anywhere near as many games this season as he would have liked, but I think there's a lack of trust in his current performance level. And I don't know how we fix that. I listened to Clive on the Arsenal Vision podcast talking about how it's to do with the environment and, the way we play and the shape and the structure and the way we build up and all the rest of it. And I thought all of that was valid, and I thought they were all good points. But I can't shake the feeling of frustration and disappointment in his current performance level. And I think that, obviously I'm going to say this, but I feel like I can tell the difference between a player being exposed by a system or by a shape versus them not being good enough on an individual level. And in recent weeks, I feel that Miles Lewis-Skelly hasn't been good enough on an individual level. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think he can ever get back to a level that is good enough for this club. He's obviously showed he can do it in the past at a very young age, under difficult circumstances. So you'd be stupid to write him off. But at the same time, his current performance level isn't where it needs to be. And until that is fixed, until you put that right, I think Mikel Arteta, at this stage in a really, really important and big season for us, is right to take the decisions that he has. I really, really do. In terms of Mikel's press conference, I'll be honest, I didn't find it that interesting this time. Very tight-lipped around the fitness of some of our injured players. Shock, horror. That's what Mikel does. There was an interesting bit about Victor Gyökeres. I felt like he sort of leapt to Victor Gyökeres' defense again. I also feel like if a manager has to keep doing that every single week, then there's probably a reason. And I got some stick on the pod that we put out the other day in the comment section from someone that said, I'm so negative. No, I'm not. I just say what I see. And I need to see more from him. Was there more against Chelsea? I think there was. I think the hold-up play was better. I thought his involvement was more. And obviously he scored a goal. So obviously there was more than what we've become accustomed to seeing from him, I would argue, since he joined Arsenal. But we still need more than that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with calling that out. I don't think there's anything wrong with demanding a higher standard from a player that you've paid north of 60 million quid for. And I do feel a lot more comfortable about the fact that he is still sort of trying to find his feet at Arsenal. And I know, maybe that sounds a bit silly to say come mid-January, but I feel a bit more comfortable about that based on the fact that Kai Havertz is back now and that Gabriel Jesus is showing that he can participate at the very least. I never questioned Jesus' talent. He's a very different type of striker in that he will drift, in that he will drop deep, in that he will go right and he will go left and all the rest of it. But having the options that we have now makes me feel more comfortable, because for me, for quite some time, Victor Gyökeres has felt like an option rather than the option. So that's where I'm at on that. Okay, shall we talk a little bit about today's game and what we can expect, I suppose, in terms of the tactical battle? Look, Sean Dyche, very much known for agricultural football. And he won't mind me saying that. That's what his team does. That's what his team, his teams, I should say, over the years have been. And he's done a very good job of keeping clubs in the division that maybe ought to have gone down. He's done a very, very good job of taking Burnley into a really high finish on one occasion as well. I think they were in the top half. And that's great. I think, if I'm being completely honest, I've been a bit underwhelmed by Dyche at Forest. I thought that Dyche would turn Forest around a bit quicker because the squad is there. The squad is a very capable one. It's much better than any squad that he's managed in the past. I would argue it's probably the most talented group of players that he's ever had at his disposal. Some of the results haven't been great. I look back at the last 5 games and there are 3 defeats in there. Those defeats, though, Manchester City, Everton. Everton are not having a great season. I'd have expected them at home at Nottingham Forest to have done something there, but they weren't able to do it. But again, look, when you're down there, you're not going to have that level of consistency, are you? You're just not. It's never going to be the case. That win that they managed to get at West Ham was, I think, the week before I went away. That was absolutely huge. Like huge, because what that did was just give them a bit of breathing space. And I suppose and I suspect that everybody around the City ground now, off the back of that, can just breathe a nice sigh of relief and can just, as a result of that, play with a bit more of a freedom. And I think when you've got a talented group of players like that, freedom is needed. But freedom only comes from earning results that create that distance between yourself and the relegation zone. So I think, having got past that and having opened that gap between themselves and West Ham now, which stands at what, if I'm just having a quick look, 7 points now, I think that will give them a freedom and a belief that they have now enough breathing space to go out and play a bit more like the kind of football that a lot of those players were brought in to play. I know under Nuno it was quite agricultural at times as well, but I think with Nuno's football, is kind of a little bit more sophisticated than Dyche's. And maybe you're not seeing that with Nuno at West Ham, but just generally speaking, based on what we know of them both as managers, I certainly believe that to be the case. If we look into this game, if we go back to sort of the previous meetings between the two clubs, Arsenal have won 50 of the 99 games between us. Forest have won 28. There's been 21 draws in there as well. The last 3 results have been as follows. We beat them 3-0. At Emirates Stadium back in September 2025. Go back to February 2025, 0-0 draw. And if you go back to the 23rd of November 2024, which was the meeting prior to that, it was Arsenal 3, Nottingham Forest 0. So 2 3-0 wins out of 3 in there for us. Nottingham Forest have lost 8 of their last 10 Premier League games against Arsenal, though both exceptions have come at the City ground since their return to the division in 2022. They beat us 1-0 in May 2023, and there was a 0-0 draw, as I've just mentioned, in February 2025. Arsenal have kept a clean sheet in each of their last 3 Premier League games against today's opponents. That's their longest run of league shutouts against the Nottingham-based club. Only West Ham and Wolves have lost more Premier League home games this season than Forest, so Arsenal should believe that they can go there and take all 3 points. This is the joint most defeats in their opening 10 home matches of a league campaign they've ever experienced. Only in 1908 and 1909 have they ever lost as many as 7 of their first 11. If I take it on to Arsenal, Arsenal, of course, drew 0-0 with Liverpool in their last Premier League game. Since the start of the 22-23 season, we've only failed to score in consecutive league games on 2 occasions. So the odds tell us that Arsenal will probably score today. Although both those times, the second game came away against Nottingham Forest. So I don't know if that kind of cancels out the good omen there. Excluding penalties, Arsenal scored more set-piece goals than any other side in the Premier League this season, 14, while only Bournemouth have conceded more from set plays than Nottingham Forest. So set-piece FC going up against a team that have conceded the second most goals from set pieces. There's a lot of stuff in these match facts that, you know, should give us confidence and belief that today is going to be a good day for us. But it's the Premier League and you just never know, do you? In terms of the team, let's move on to team selection, because I think a lot of this team today, it picks itself. For me, it does anyway. You know, you look at you start from the back, you start with the goalkeeper. David Raya didn't play in midweek in the cup, but he certainly comes back into the team for me today. I did talk, didn't I? I touched on the differences between him and Kepa Arrizabalaga when they play for us. Centre-backs, as long as they're fit and available, you're going to go with Saliba and Gabriel pretty much every time, aren't you? And with so much of our work being done in the Champions League, I know Inter is a tough place to go. You would think that that's the game, wouldn't you? If you do need to break that pairing up and give someone a breather, that you do that in. Look, I think I go White at right back, and I think I go Timber at left back. But that's on the basis that Ricardo Calafiori isn't fit. I wouldn't bring Miles Lewis-Skelly into the team today. I just wouldn't. That's my opinion. I don't think he's playing at a high enough level. And although you could argue that our defense looked a little bit shaky at Stamford Bridge, at least around the 2 goals that we conceded, and it was very out of character for us, I still think that I've got a lot more faith in that 4 defensively than I would if Miles Lewis-Skelly's in there for now. And again, not writing the kid off, but right now I don't think he's performing at that level, and therefore he shouldn't play. Moving into the midfield, Martin Zubimendi, I think the other night against Chelsea, maybe played his best game in an Arsenal shirt. Too big a statement? Some people might think so. I don't think so. I think that on Wednesday night, he showed all the faces of Martin Zubimendi, and that's what gave me so much encouragement. When he had to squeeze up and press people, he was able to do it. When he had to clean up in front of the back line, he was able to do it. When he had to get into the final third and make a difference from an offensive point of view, he was able to do that as well. So I really loved his performance the other day. I want to see him in the team today. Declan Rice, you know, normally at the absolute minimum, an 8 out of 10 player. And I think away at Nottingham Forest, who are probably going to be quite physical. It's an evening kickoff. The atmosphere is going to be great. It always is at the City Ground. It's one of my favorite places to go. I'm not going today, but it is one of my favorite places to watch football. So I think you're going to need the presence of a Declan Rice in there to sort of give us that little bit of added security that we might need. Because often, like, we talk about players and we talk about the shape of a midfield, and I see a lot of people, I have this conversation with people a lot, when they go, yeah, man, play Odegaard and Eze in the midfield together. And I look at that and I think, look, over the course of the season, there'll probably be a handful of games where you can get away with that. But at the end of the day, if you don't have control first, you can't play. And in order to have control, you need to be dominant. And I think Declan Rice is so important in terms of giving us that sort of dominance in the middle of the park. I'm going to go with Odegaard as the third midfielder. Listen, I don't think he played well the other night against Chelsea. I was a little bit underwhelmed and disappointed with him. And it was frustrating because, you know, maybe it felt like he turned the corner a few weeks back. His performances were much better. It's only one game. And so, you know, you can't start saying that Odegaard's reverted back to the underperforming version of Martin Odegaard that we've seen for a while. But I think I'd start him. And I'd keep that midfield dynamic there. Rice, Zubimendi, Odegaard. That for me, if we were playing the Champions League final tomorrow, would be our midfield. Saka will play from the right. On the left-hand side, I'm not sure what I'd do here. Maybe with Timber at left back, if that's what we go with. I'd be tempted to give either Martinelli or Eze an opportunity to work from that left-hand side rather than Trossard. I think in the end, I'm going to go with Trossard. Because I think I probably trust him more in terms of being able to produce a bit of end product in the final third more than any of the others at the moment. He's been one of our better players this season. And I'm going to go with Gyökeres up front to start the game. But, I'd be doing that and I'd be telling him, go and give it your absolute all. And if I've got to take you off after 60 minutes, that's what I'm doing. There was that interesting little moment, weren't there, between Gyökeres and Saka the other night. Saka should have found him. He didn't. The ball broke. Arsenal then come down the right-hand side with White, who then seeks to find Gyökeres, and Arsenal score their second goal of the night. And Gyökeres' reaction to not getting the ball from Saka initially was good for me. I like to see that. I want to see him demand it. I want to see him tell people exactly where he wants it. I thought all of that was really good. Then there was a video going around, and it's probably a mountain being made out of a molehill, and it's probably nothing. But there was a video going around where Gyökeres was celebrating, and Saka comes over to sort of like bump chest with him, and he's sort of like, again, I don't know if this is even worth a discussion, but a lot of people have taken it as though he was a little bit dismissive, maybe, of Bukayo Saka, as if to say, you should have bloody given me the ball in the first place. And yeah, maybe there's a bit of a media narrative there, but I kind of hope that that is the case. And not because I want to see players, having bad relationships and fractured relationships. I don't want to see any of that. But I think at that level, right, where you all want to win, where you all want to succeed, where you all desperately want to achieve something, there's nothing wrong with a bit of confrontation and a bit of needle. There is nothing wrong with it. It happens in everyday life. Okay, you have confrontations and, disagreements with people in everyday life. Why are we so petrified of that? Like, why isn't it the case that two people can disagree on something, lock heads, and get over it? Albert Stovenberg apparently involved with Declan Rice the other day. It's done. Maybe they had a disagreement about something specific at that moment and in that time. That does not mean that their relationship is completely broken. It means that people are holding each other to account, and people are hoping to maintain those standards by calling out the things that aren't done right. People used to fight all the time in football and get over it the next day. And it's just nowadays, because everything's under a microscope in terms of the way we analyze football, people try, with obviously anti-Arsenal agendas, to turn it into something it is not. If they've had a little disagreement there, that's absolutely fine by me. And you know what? You can say that I've been a little bit negative about Victor Gyökeres, and maybe I've not given him the love that others have in terms of his performances. But in this, if it is Saka versus Gyökeres to a degree, I'm fully team Victor Gyökeres, because that ball should have gone into him. There's no question about that. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And I've always sort of pushed back against the narrative that whenever Gyökeres doesn't perform, it's solely down to the service, because I think he's got to do more and should do more. But my point is that, that ball should go in. There's right and there's wrong there. It doesn't go in. And so it don't matter that it's Bukayo Saka, everybody's sort of favorite player and the star boy, etc. And as he was called the other day, the franchise player of Arsenal. I couldn't give two hoots about that. What I care about is what's right and what's wrong. And if we don't try and maintain those standards, call each other out, but then also have the maturity to get over these things and move past them, then we ain't going to win anything. Some of the best teams in the history of the sport have had, I'm sure, very, very heated disagreements and discussions at times behind the scenes. And look, in a real world, you want it to be resolved behind the scenes. You want that show of maybe disagreement to happen outside of the public eye. But if it spills over, it spills over, and it is what it is. We move on. But yeah, that's my team I'd go with. So Raya in goal, White at right back, Saliba, Gabriel, and Timber across the back line. Rice, Zubimendi, and Odegaard would be my starting midfield with Trossard left, Saka right, and Gyökeres through the middle. I'd like to see Kai Havertz get significant minutes in this game, though, because I do think if we're going to sustain the level that we want, I think we need to have Kai Havertz back and more involved. The thing is, though, with Kai Havertz is that we're still in a stage where we've got to be a little bit careful with his fitness, but he's never going to get up to speed if we don't give him the minutes. So, obviously a lot of that is dependent on game state, how it's going, etc., etc. But yeah, I think we need to maybe just accelerate that reintegration of Kai Havertz just a little bit more, so that he's ready when we really, really need him, because I think we will between now and the end of the season. Right, we're going to take a really short pause. When we come back, I'm going to touch on a couple of your questions from the comment section. I'm going to give you my prediction for today's game, and I just want to touch on a couple of bits involving Manchester City as well. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you're watching us on YouTube, get involved with all those things. They really, really do help. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review. That is really, really important as well. And if you want to go one further, you can become a patron. The link is in the description below. Thank you so, so much for your support. Okay, let's get into prediction. What am I doing prediction-wise? I'm going to go Nottingham Forest 1, Arsenal 3. Oh, look, Ryan's just put that in as well. I'm going to go for a 3-1 Arsenal win. That's what I think is going to happen. That's what I fancy. And that would be a great result. And if Manchester City could drop points earlier in the day, which I'm not holding my breath for, because Man United are, Man United of recent years. I don't think anyone should ever really advise putting too much faith and belief in them. But it's a derby, new manager bounce, all of that. You never know. You never know. Stranger things have happened. But yeah, I'm going for an Arsenal 3-1 win. That's my prediction. While we're on the subject, though, of Manchester City, just quickly, I do want to cover a couple of bits. I've seen a lot of people sort of reacting from an Arsenal perspective about the Marc Guehi stuff. Crystal Palace were always going to be keen to sell if they could raise some money, given they stand to lose him on a free. If that's a club that he would have wanted to go to anyway, then why Marc Guehi wouldn't accept it now, I don't know. From all the reports that we've read, he's going to be on ridiculous wages. And you can understand why he thinks it's probably the right time and the right move to make. Obviously, it was reported not that long ago that Arsenal have an interest in him. That can still be true, that Arsenal like Marc Guehi, that Arsenal would have made a move for Marc Guehi if he was still available in the summer. But it looks like City are moving to get this wrapped up quickly. And they're going to do that because they've got one hell of a crisis at centre-back right now in terms of injuries. So you can see why they're doing it. The other thing that's come up in the last couple of days, and I think this has been prompted by Man City spending big again, Symeou and Guehi sort of in this window. It looks like in the last calendar year, they've spent 500 million quid, right? So from January to January or whatever it is, however it was written out. Anyway, basically, Man City are spending a lot of money, okay? And we spend a lot of money, right? The top clubs in the world, they spend a lot of money. Man City will always argue and say our net spend is less because they've been able to make good sales. And again, that's fine, valid point. But I think the reason people are getting agitated by what Man City are doing once again in this window is because there is 115 financial charges against them that are still outstanding. And so, listen, I've said this all along. I don't know that Man City are guilty. How could I possibly know? I don't have access to the files. And even if I did, who am I to sort of interpret them against the laws? I don't know, right? A lot of people suspect they are, but we don't know. If there was a verdict tomorrow that said Manchester City are cleared of all of those charges, I'm not sure I'd take it in good faith, let's say at 100%. There'll be a part of me that's like, have they just tied you up in knots here? I guess what I'm saying, there'll always be that suspicion, Okay, there'll always be that suspicion, whatever the verdict. But once you get a verdict, you can move on. This has been going on now for multiple years. And yet Manchester City, every time a transfer window comes along, spend, spend, and spend. And I don't begrudge them for the spending per se, because we're doing it and others are doing it, right? That's the nature of the game these days. But it is frustrating that while they are strengthening and gearing themselves up to try and hunt us down and chase us down, this thing is still rumbling on in the background. And there is no sign whatsoever of a conclusion. There's just no sign of it. And I get that, there's going to be appeal processes, and this is a complex case that requires a lot of studying and a lot of, interpretation of the laws versus what it is they've allegedly done. And then you've got to look at the evidence that those charging them have gathered versus the evidence that Manchester City are putting forward in a bid to prove their innocence. It's a whole horrible cycle, and it's a really, really complex thing. But this is such a terrible look for the Premier League right now. And the fact that they have not got to grips with this yet, and there's been no conclusion, while Manchester City are going out every time a transfer window comes along and spending millions upon millions upon millions, it just makes a mockery of the authorities at the top of our league. And I feel uncomfortable with City signing these players now, not because I'm petrified that they're going to catch us. Obviously, that is a worry for me, but I'm not upset about the signings because of that. And I'm not upset about the signings because they're players that, I would have desperately wanted us to sign. They're both kind of players that if the environment and the conditions were right, I'd have probably moved for, but not under any circumstances whatsoever. So I'm kind of indifferent in that sense, but it just annoys me that, you take someone to court, you charge them with something, but then you allow it to rumble on this long. I believe, right, that there should be a cutoff with these things. If you can't prove me guilty, and I'm not talking about serious crimes like murder and things like that, I'm talking in a football sense. If you're accusing me of breaching some sporting rules, which, let's be honest, isn't life or death, then, there should be a limit on the time frame, because people will blame Man City and they'll say, look at Man City, look how crafty they are, they're ducking and diving and they're doing everything they possibly can to avoid this. I'm pinning it on the Premier League here. I'm pinning it on the Premier League, because you should have had this done and dusted by now. It should have been proved beyond reasonable doubt by now, and it isn't. And so, Manchester City are going about their business and essentially laughing at the Premier League behind their backs. And the Premier League is still sitting there scratching their heads trying to figure out how to make this thing stick. And it's a dark cloud that looms over the Premier League at the moment. And, if Arsenal go and win the Premier League, then less will be made of it, obviously. But if Man City were to win the Premier League, or anything for that matter this season, again, those questions are going to come up. It shouldn't take this long, is the bottom line. But yeah, look, I've given you my prediction, giving you my thoughts. I'm going to be back on Sunday morning to react to the Nottingham Forest game. Really, really looking forward to sitting down and watching that later on. Not before the Manchester derby, though. Maybe I'll squeeze a bit Tottenham West Ham in between as well. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Thank you so much for all your love, for all your support, for bearing with me over the course of the last week where the schedule's been a bit all over the place and we've missed days. But those of you that have family abroad and friends abroad will know that whenever you go abroad, you could have all the intentions in the world of, I'm going to have loads of spare time and I'm going to do this, this, and this. But then you meet up with that person, and obviously in Cyprus, everything's so laid back, man. If someone says they come and meet you at 1, they might come and meet you at 2 and they wouldn't even bat an eyelid. That's just the way it goes. So very, very difficult to plan. What I will say, because I wasn't at Stamford Bridge the other day, I was watching it from afar. I did enjoy the Thomas Frank chant. That was fantastic. As Sean's just put the lyrics in the chat. Remember, like, subscribe, and all the rest of it. Check us out on Patreon, and we'll be back very, very soon with more. Until then, take care of yourselves. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye. Come on, you gun.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.